Let's be brutally honest. Most men break no contact, not because it's the right time, but because the silence becomes unbearable. You start missing her laugh, her texts, her attention, and before you know it, your fingers hover over that message button, convincing yourself that maybe, just maybe, she's missing you too. But here's the truth most men refuse to accept. When you break no contact too early, you don't pull her closer. You remind her why she left. You erase the mystery, the curiosity, the tension that makes her question whether losing you was a mistake. Right now, she's not thinking about the good times. She's thinking about her freedom, her options, her control. And if you reach out too soon, you become the easy validation she can use to feed her ego, not her heart. That's what women do subconsciously. They test how much power they still have over you. And when you message her first, especially while she's still emotionally distant, you answer her question without her ever having to ask. You tell her, yes, you still have me. But the brutal truth, a woman only truly starts to feel your absence when she realizes she can no longer sense your energy. No calls, no texts, no checking her stories, nothing. That's when the silence becomes louder than your words ever were. That's when she begins to wonder, did he finally move on? Because every woman expects a man to chase after she pulls away. But when you don't, her psychology starts to turn against her. You see, women crave emotional certainty, and when that certainty disappears, curiosity takes over. That's why silence is your power, not as a tactic, but as a transformation. Because the no contact rule is not about waiting for her to miss you. It's about reclaiming your emotional center, resetting your value, and breaking the dependency that made you easy to walk away from. But there's something deeper here most men miss. You don't stay silent to manipulate her. You stay silent to rediscover yourself. You become the man she can no longer read, the one she can't predict. That's when you start to rewire the attraction in her mind. And yet, the hardest part of this journey is when the days start to stretch and your mind becomes your enemy. You start seeing signs where there are none. A liked post, a random memory, a song that hits too close to home, and your heart whispers, maybe she's thinking about me too. But here's the thing, missing you doesn't always mean she wants you back. Sometimes it means she just misses the way you made her feel. And if you reach out from that place of weakness, she'll feel it instantly. Women can sense when a man is emotionally unstable, when his message isn't about connection, but desperation. That's why your silence matters. It's not punishment, it's respect for your self-worth. Because every time you resist the urge to break no contact, you send a message louder than words. My peace is more valuable than your attention. But when should you break it? When do you know it's not weakness, but wisdom to reach out again? The answer lies in one simple truth. You break no contact only when her energy starts to reach for you, when she stops pretending she doesn't care, when her curiosity becomes consistent action, when she's the one sending subtle signals, asking mutual friends about you, or creating reasons to re-enter your life. That's when the dynamic shifts, because attraction always returns when uncertainty meets strength. But if you break silence just to fill the void, you lose both, her respect and your power. The silence you're sitting in now isn't empty. It's the space where your value grows. Don't end it out of loneliness. End it only when she's earned access to the man you're becoming. Question for you. Have you ever broken no contact too early and instantly regretted it? Be honest in the comments below. If this spoke to you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this truth tonight. There comes a moment, after weeks of silence, when something inside you begins to shift. At first, it feels like emptiness. You wake up, check your phone out of habit, and realize there's nothing there. No messages, no calls, no signs that she's thinking about you. But what you don't see is that this emptiness is the beginning of transformation. Because silence doesn't just test her, it tests you. It exposes your dependency, your need for reassurance, your attachment to being wanted. And most men can't face that. They mistake silence for rejection, when in truth, it's the mirror of who they've become. Every man who's ever lost a woman he cared about knows the feeling, that pull between wanting to prove you've moved on and wanting her to notice that you haven't. But the men who truly win in silence are the ones who understand that healing and power grow in the same soil. You don't rebuild attraction by waiting, you rebuild it by rising. The man she fell for once had a spark, a hunger, a self-assured energy that made her feel safe and excited at the same time. But when that man starts chasing, apologizing, and begging for validation, that spark dies. What no one tells you is that women don't miss you when you disappear. They miss you when you reemerge different. When the silence ends and the man she once knew is no longer the same. That's when curiosity turns into desire. That's when she realizes she lost something real. Not a man who begged, but a man who evolved. That's why no contact is never about waiting for her to text first. It's about creating the version of yourself that no longer needs her to feel complete. When you stop counting the days, when you stop checking her stories, when you stop wondering if she's dating someone new, that's when you're finally becoming dangerous. Because that's when you detach emotionally, and detachment is the most magnetic energy a man can ever possess. You see, women are drawn to emotional strength the same way fire is drawn to oxygen. The less you try to control her perception, the more she starts to feel it. Because the moment you stop chasing, you shift the power. You go from the man who needs her to the man she lost. That shift happens silently, but it's real. She begins to wonder where your attention went, who you're becoming, and whether you've finally outgrown her. And that uncertainty starts to eat at her. It's funny how silence works. At first, it's her victory, but over time, it becomes her mirror. She starts to replay every moment, every word you said, every time she took your presence for granted. And now, the man who once texted good morning isn't texting at all. The man who once explained himself doesn't explain anymore. That quiet confidence, it terrifies her more than any argument ever could. But understand this, silence only has power when it's built on growth. If you spend no contact obsessing, stalking, or hoping she'll change, you're still giving her your energy, just in silence. You're not disconnected, you're just quiet about your dependency. The real transformation happens when your focus shifts from her to you. When you start investing that same emotional energy into your purpose, your discipline, your peace. That's when the tables turn. Because while she's trying to figure out what you're doing, you're building something she can't ignore. A new version of yourself that commands respect. When you reach that place, breaking no contact no longer feels like a need. It becomes a choice, and that's the only time it's ever worth it. If you do hear from her again, don't rush. Don't jump back into old patterns. Watch her actions, not her words. A woman who truly regrets losing you won't just reach out. She'll show up differently. She'll communicate with vulnerability, not pride. She'll ask, not demand. And she'll treat your attention like it's valuable again, because she'll feel the difference in who you've become. And that's the moment every man who stayed silent dreams of. Not her message, but her realization. The realization that she lost a man who outgrew her absence. That's when the silence ends. Not because you needed her back, but because she finally saw your worth without you having to prove it. There's a point in every man's silence where he begins to understand something he never saw before. The truth about how women perceive strength. Because contrary to what most men believe, women aren't drawn to constant attention. They're drawn to emotional independence. It's not your messages, your affection, or your availability that make her want you again. It's your ability to walk away and mean it. You see, when you stop reacting, she starts reflecting. When you stop chasing, she starts remembering. And when you stop waiting, she starts wondering. That's the hidden rhythm of female psychology. A woman becomes emotionally curious the moment she feels she no longer has control. But most men sabotage this process by giving in too soon. They mistake temporary emotions for lasting connection and end up feeding her ego instead of rebuilding her respect. When she first pulls away, she expects resistance. She expects you to fight for her, to prove your love, to chase her until she feels reassured that she could have you again whenever she wants. But when that chase doesn't come, when your silence lingers longer than her pride expected, her subconscious starts to shift. It's no longer about you chasing her, it becomes about her trying to figure out why you stopped. That confusion becomes tension. That tension becomes attraction. That's why your stillness has more power than your words ever will. Because the most seductive thing a man can ever do is stay calm in the face of emotional chaos. When she throws silence at you and you respond with peace, she realizes something she didn't expect. She doesn't control you anymore. And that realization is terrifying for her ego, but magnetic for her emotions. Understand this: a woman respects what she can't easily influence, and she's drawn to what she can't fully understand. That's why when you go silent, it's not just about no contact, it's about becoming unpredictable again. She's used to your patterns, your reactions, your weaknesses. When those disappear, she starts seeing you through new eyes. She starts remembering the man she once admired, not the one who over-explained, but the one who moved with quiet certainty. And here's something few men realize. Every woman secretly fears losing the emotional safety a strong man provides. Not the comfort of his presence, but the security of knowing he's grounded enough to handle her storms. When you show that silence doesn't break you, you remind her of that safety. That's when she starts to feel the emotional imbalance. She begins to question her choices. The power dynamic reverses, not because you took it from her, but because she gave it away by underestimating you. But make no mistake, she won't admit this. She might act distant, post like she's moved on, or even date someone new. Yet deep down, there's a quiet tension eating at her. Because while she's pretending not to care, she's constantly measuring the silence, waiting to see if you'll finally crack. Every day you don't, her curiosity grows stronger. And one night, when she's alone, when the noise fades, when her phone stays quiet longer than she expected, that's when it hits her. The realization that maybe she wasn't the only one capable of walking away. That maybe she lost something rare. Not a man who loved her, but a man who had the strength to love himself more. That's when her messages start showing up again. Not with confessions, but with subtle questions. Hey, how have you been? I saw something that reminded me of you. It's her way of testing the waters, seeing if the door is still open. And here's where most men fail again. They rush back, thinking the silence worked, and in that rush, they lose everything they built. Because silence isn't meant to be a weapon, it's meant to be a filter. When she returns, your calm should remain. You don't reply with excitement, you reply with composure. You don't try to impress her, you let her rediscover the man who doesn't need to. That contrast is what reawakens the respect that was lost. The truth is, no contact isn't about getting her back. It's about getting yourself back, your balance, your dignity, your power. And once you do, the version of her that left you will never fit your life again. Because you'll see her differently, not as the center of your world, but as a chapter that taught you how to stand alone. And that's when you realize the silence was never between you and her. It was between you and the man you were afraid to become. There comes a quiet moment in every man's healing. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic one, but the silent shift where you finally stop checking her social media, stop wondering what she's doing, and stop trying to decode her silence. That's the moment you realize something profound. She's no longer the reason you're in pain. Your attachment is. Because what hurts the most isn't losing her. It's losing the version of yourself that depended on her to feel enough. That's what no contact was always meant to reveal. It's not a strategy, it's an awakening. It forces you to see how much of your identity was tied to being wanted. And when that external validation disappears, you're left with the question most men avoid: who am I when no one is watching me? That question changes everything, because the moment you start answering it, really answering it, you begin to rebuild from the inside out. You stop chasing closure. You stop replaying conversations. You stop wondering what she's thinking. You begin to understand that the end of a relationship isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's protection. Protection from the version of yourself that kept choosing someone who wasn't choosing you back. And here's the part that almost feels unfair. The more you detach, the more she feels it. When your energy no longer revolves around her, she senses the loss in ways words can't describe. Women are intuitive creatures. They can feel when a man's emotional gravity has shifted. When his silence stops being a wound and becomes a boundary, something in her changes. Because she's no longer the center of your focus, and deep down, every woman craves to be seen by the man who no longer looks her way. But what most men don't understand is this: you can't fake detachment. You can't pretend to be over her while secretly waiting for her to come back. She'll feel the difference. Detachment isn't performance, it's peace. It's when you genuinely accept that her absence no longer defines your worth. That's when you become powerful again. That power doesn't look like arrogance. It doesn't come from proving a point. It comes from presence, the kind of energy that doesn't chase or justify. You become the man who walks into a room and doesn't need attention because he's already complete. And ironically, that's the exact energy that reignites attraction, because women don't fall for words. They fall for emotional certainty. Think about it. When you first met her, she didn't fall for what you said. She fell for how you carried yourself, the way you looked at her without needing her approval, the calmness in your tone, the focus in your energy. Over time, that confidence faded, replaced by fear. Fear of losing her, fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough. That's when she began to pull away. Because no woman feels safe with a man who's afraid of losing her. She only feels safe with a man who's not afraid of walking away. That's the paradox of attraction. The more willing you are to lose her, the more she wants to stay. The more you cling, the faster she drifts. That's why silence works, not because it manipulates her, but because it frees you. It gives you space to return to your natural power, the power that existed long before she came into your life. When that power returns, breaking no contact no longer feels emotional. It feels strategic. You're not reaching out from need, but from choice. You're not hoping she responds. You're testing if she's worth your time again. That subtle shift changes everything, because now you're not the one waiting for her energy. You're observing it. And if she does return, you don't jump back into the old rhythm. You let her prove consistency. Because the truth is, anyone can miss you for a moment, but only those who've grown can meet you at your new level. You don't rebuild from nostalgia. You rebuild from strength. So if you're sitting in silence right now, wondering when to break it, remember this. The right time is when you've outgrown the version of you that needed her. When your peace feels more valuable than her attention, that's when you'll know you don't need her to fill the silence anymore. You've become the silence itself. There's a reason the strongest men in silence never announce their comeback, because real transformation doesn't make noise. It happens in the small, invisible moments. When you resist the urge to text her, when you choose to hit the gym instead of scrolling her feed, when you start to rebuild your discipline while she's still looking for attention. That's where power is born, not from words, but from control. You see, most men think silence is weakness. They think it means surrender, that she's winning, that they've lost their chance forever. But that's not how female psychology works. A woman doesn't respect the man who gives her constant access. She respects the man who earns her reflection. Because when she has to think about you, when she has to wonder what you're doing, who you've become, and whether she made a mistake, that's when the emotional balance shifts. And that balance is everything. Women fall for certainty, but they stay for mystery. When you were always available, she didn't have to question her place in your life, and that predictability killed her desire. But when you went silent and your energy withdrew, that mystery returned. It's not about playing games. It's about returning to your natural power as a man who doesn't need validation to feel worthy. The silence you've held isn't just distance. It's the creation of contrast. Because before, she knew exactly who you were, the man who replied instantly, who always cared, who feared losing her. But now you've become something else entirely. You've become a man who can stand alone. And that shift terrifies her because it forces her to confront her own emotional contradictions. Here's what happens next. When you reach that level of calm detachment, She starts to feel something she hasn't in a long time. Respect. Not the shallow kind that comes from attraction, but the deep, subconscious kind that comes from security. She begins to see you not as the man who wants her, but as the man she once underestimated. That's when she'll start testing again. Subtle messages, sudden curiosity, emotional breadcrumbs that lead nowhere. But this time, you're different. You don't take the bait. You respond with calm. You match her tone, but not her energy. You understand that her tests aren't invitations, they're measurements. She's trying to see if you've really changed or if the silence was just a tactic. And your composure is what proves her wrong, because now your presence doesn't seek approval, it commands respect. If she genuinely wants another chance, she'll come with humility, not games. She'll speak with accountability, not manipulation. And if she doesn't, you won't chase, because you've already learned that losing her didn't destroy you. It revealed you. It showed you that your strength was never in how much love you could give her, but in how much self-respect you could keep for yourself. That's the essence of masculine energy. Quiet dominance, grounded presence, emotional control. The kind of man who doesn't move from emotion, but from intention. That's the man she can't replace, because he's not playing for her attention anymore. He's playing for his evolution. And here's the paradox that always surprises men. When you no longer need her back, that's when she feels you the most. Not because of words, but because energy doesn't lie. The man who's whole again radiates differently. He walks differently, speaks differently, and carries himself like someone who could love, but doesn't have to. That's what women crave but rarely find. A man who can love deeply without losing himself in the process. So, if you're asking when to break no contact, the answer is simple. Only when it no longer matters whether she responds or not. Because by then, you're no longer trying to reopen the past. You're deciding if she deserves a place in your present. And maybe she will reach out, maybe she'll realize what she lost, maybe she won't, but either way, you win. Because you didn't use silence to get her back. You used it to get yourself back. That's the true purpose of no contact. Not revenge, not waiting, but rebirth. The kind of rebirth that transforms a man from being emotionally reactive to unshakably grounded. The kind that makes people who once took you for granted suddenly realize what they can't replace. So keep your silence, keep your growth private, keep your peace sacred. Because one day, when she sees who you've become, not in words, not in posts, but in your presence, she'll understand that you didn't disappear to forget her. You disappeared to find yourself. And the man you found doesn't chase anymore. He chooses. And that choice, that calm, quiet choice, is what separates boys who seek attention from men who command respect.